British holidaymakers were rushing to get back to the UK last weekend.
Really disappointed and deflated that we needed to cut our holiday short. And it's been a panic to get here and book flights. Incredibly disappointed.
Like many of its European peers, the UK has closed its doors to some member states just weeks after opening them. It's removed Croatia from its safe list, meaning that travellers returning to the UK are subject to 14 days of quarantine. Germany too has red-listed parts of Croatia and other countries in the Balkans, as well as all of Spain, after a flare-up of COVID-19 infections. This while the country has also seen a spike. On Saturday, it reported more than 2,000 new cases, the highest daily jump since April.
There are two components contributing to this. The one is infections within Germany, where we can see that there are still transmissions happening at parties, but also at the workplace, like in the meat industry or at communal facilities. But a new component that has been added in the last weeks is the returning holidaymakers. Almost half of the new infections being registered with us have come from returning holidaymakers and have been imported from abroad and therefore contribute significantly to the new infection figures.
And that's pushing the travel industry into turbulence again. 34 airlines have already collapsed this year. In Europe, UK-based Flybe was the first to fall from the sky in March, citing a pandemic-driven drop in bookings. And last June, Lufthansa subsidiary SunExpress Deutschland became the latest carrier to shut down after nearly all its fleet was grounded from April until the end of May. Germany-based TUI said travel bookings from June to August fell more than 80% compared to the same period last year. The world's biggest tour operator has sold just 16% of its planned 2020 inventory. And the International Air Transport Association expects passenger numbers to drop 60% this year. It's downgraded its forecast 3 times since March. Governments across Europe have injected billions of dollars into furlough programs, bailouts and state-backed loans to keep most carriers in the air. Air France and Lufthansa alone have received a combined $23.5 billion in state support. Industry experts believe the blanket ban of removing entire countries from safe travel lists instead of just regions with high infection rates is only hurting the travel industry further. For airlines and tour operators, it means a return to profit is likely to remain a long-haul destination. Laila Humaira, TRT World.
Well, let's get more on this now with Ulrich Leuchtmann in Frankfurt. He's head of FX research at Commerzbank. Welcome back to the program, Ulrich. Now, we know we're currently in the thick of peak travel season in Europe, but some economies are more dependent on tourism than others. Which countries really rely on the services sector and tourism in terms of their bottom line, their economy?
Yeah, well, inside Europe, it's mainly Spain, it's Italy, it's partly France. All the countries around the Mediterranean, basically, they are the ones who are getting hurt most by this new shutdown in tourism activities. Hope was high, certainly, at the beginning of summer, that we would see a roughly normal or close to normal season in tourism industry, but this has vanished at the moment, at least when Spain was locked from travel from Germany and UK.
Now, we know that travel and tourism associations across Europe are almost united in urging governments not to reimpose travel restrictions or quarantine measures that would really deter travellers from going on trips across Europe. But do countries really have a choice if they want to prevent a second wave from taking hold in their countries?
Well, frankly, they hardly have any choice, because the worst thing that could happen to European economies would be another lockdown like we saw in March, which would affect broad-based industrial and service activities across the economies. And therefore, everything that can avoid such a lockdown is something which, in the end, might turn out to be not a good solution, but a better solution than keeping tourism in place. As we've heard in your interview with Robert Koch Institute, that large part of this is due to these new infections is due to tourism.
Now, as you say, countries like Italy and Spain were among the keenest to reopen their tourism sectors because their economies really do depend on the income that comes from travel. But was it a mistake, do you think, that these countries reopened in July without the proper measures in place to really keep a track of cases and prevent a rise in infections?
Well, in retrospect, we are always smarter than we were before. But obviously, this is always a very delicate balance. Look, we had seen at that time falling infection rates, and obviously, it's mandatory from an economic standpoint of view not to overdo these measures. And therefore, I fully understand why politicians at that time decided the way they did. But obviously, in retrospect, it turned out to be too early and too much of infection risk that we took in this on this road.
Yes, and as an economist, what measures would you recommend to these European governments in order to cushion the blow from the impact to the travel industry? Do they need to be offering more subsidies or furlough schemes or stimulus? So what would you recommend in order to salvage and save this industry across Europe?
Well, first of all, the measures should be as targeted as possible. Shutting down regions which are hardly affected by rising infection rates is certainly something which is overdoing the economic damage and is creating damage that does not have to be done. But the other point is, I mean, it's very difficult with these subsidies for some industries, may it be tourism or others, because we don't know what will come out in the long run. Will we see as much tourism industry in 2-3 years, but Corona is not a topic anymore? Or does this experience change the behavior of consumers in the long run? If the last thing would be the case, then subsidies for industries which have to shrink anyway would be something which would not be economically sensible. This is very hard to assess at the moment because we all don't know how much of long-term change in consumer behavior will come out of it.
Okay, Ulrich Leuchtmann, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you again for joining us on the program.